The race to replace Mitch McConnell as the Senate Republican leader, well, it's afoot. And Minority Whip John Thune, well, he's jumped into that race. South Dakota Republican Senator and Senate Minority Whip John Thune joins us now. Senator, news today, the president is ordering the U.S. military to construct a port in Gaza. Do you support that move?
Well, I definitely support getting rid of the Hamas there. And I'm hoping
that's not what this is about.
No,
this is about providing more assistance to Palestinian civilians.
And I think we
sounds like you're ambivital about it.
Well, I think we all want to be supportive of the civilians in the area there. What worries me about whenever we open the checkbook up and send money to that region, that it gets somehow stolen by Hamas and used to support their activities. So a lot of our members, I know, are concerned, and this was one of the things that we debated in the bill that went across the Senate floor, was of the humanitarian aid, who's in charge of it? And most of us believe that the Israelis ought to be in charge of helping get that to the right places, and so that it doesn't fall in the hands of Hamas.
But that's not what's going to happen here. It'll be aid organizations, non-governmental organizations that will take the aid and try to distribute it.
Right.
You're not comfortable with that?
Well, I mean, I think what we saw with UNRWA is there are a lot of those aid, there was a lot of infiltration there with Hamas and a lot of malign activity that came with that. So I'll be interested to hear what he has to say. I assume he's going to talk about it tonight, and we'll make a judgment evaluation based on that. But the only thing I would say is I am very cautious about or skeptical of aid that goes into the area that we don't have complete control over how it's getting dispersed.
We've had news this week that Donald Trump is likely to become the nominee of the party. You recently endorsed him. I'm wondering why it took so long for you to endorse him.
Well, I let the process play out. I said all along I'd support the nominee in the end, but I came out and endorsed Tim Scott early on. He's a colleague and somebody I know really well and have a lot of confidence in. But when it became clear to me, particularly after South Carolina, I figured if give Governor Haley a chance in her own state, she lost there and lost decisively. It was clear to me at that point that he was going to be the nominee. And I think for us on the Republican side, we want to make sure that we put an end to the Biden-Schumer agenda, try and get the majority back in the Senate and flip the White House and see if we can get some changes and change the direction of the country. So that was why I got behind the president, former president, and I think now it's a clear choice. It's going to be him or Joe Biden.
And you are obviously running to replace Mitch McConnell as the leader of the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate. Have you talked to the former president about getting involved? Do you want him to get involved in this leadership race?
Well, I mean, I guess I would hope that they let the Senate decide these things. These are issues. The electorate is right now 49 Republican senators. Hopefully after the election it'll be more than that. And I can't control what the president does. I'm going to do my best to argue to my colleagues about why I think it makes sense for me to lead Senate Republicans and to work with hopefully a Republican president. We'll see hopefully a Republican House after this election. But in any event, I want to be in a position to bring a new generation of consistent, conservative, principled leadership. It empowers a lot of our colleagues. You're going to hear one of them tonight. Katie Britt, senator from Alabama, is a terrific young senator, and we've got a lot of talent among Republicans in the Senate, and I'd like to figure out how we can put it to work and make the country better.
Senator, as you well know, Alabama has been in the news very recently about in vitro fertilization. Do you believe there should be federal legislation that should guarantee access to that nationwide?
Well, I mean, I'm always a little reluctant to get the federal government involved. Now, Alabama passed legislation, which the governor signed, which makes it clear that IVF is going to be available in the state of Alabama. And I don't know of other states that are having this conversation right now, but I'm a big supporter of IVF. I think a lot of my colleagues, Republican colleagues,
why not do it federally?
Well, I mean, I don't know that there's been any attempt to do that. If there's a proposal out there, we'll take a look at it. But I've always believed, and I think this makes the most sense on these types of issues, that as much as we can distribute power out of Washington, allow that decision-making to be made back in state capitals, we're better off. In this case, state of Alabama, the court there made this decision, and the state legislature... Did you agree with that decision and that interpretation? No, I think the state legislature quickly corrected it, and I think that's the way it should be.
And would that theory also apply to any attempt to issue some kinds of restrictions to abortion access on the federal level?
Well, we've debated this back and forth about, is there a number, 15 weeks, and I've been on bills in the past to do that, but I would argue, and I think most of our, at least on the Republican side of the aisle, our members believe that the court's decision sent it back to the voters, and that this ought to be decided not by people in black robes in Washington, D.C., but by the American people. And every state's got its own, views on this, and their state legislatures reflect that. And I think that's the general consensus among Republicans. There are some, I think, who would be supportive of some sort of federal engagement there, but it's not. That's certainly not the view I think that's held by most Republicans.
The next big choice for former President Trump as he heads to becoming the party nominee is to pick a running mate. Yes or no? Is the running mate he's likely to pick going to be in the House chamber tonight?
That's possible. Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
Well, I mean, I don't know who he's going to pick. You guys maybe. I think we're all that's a guessing game that everybody's involved with. But there are some options, and clearly members of Congress, both House and Senate, who are on that list. And of course,
they're certainly vying for it.
They're certainly and like I said, I mean, I supported Tim Scott when he was running for president. I think he'd be a great pick for vice president. But there are others out there who would be very capable as well.
Senator John Thune, thank you so very much. We have to go.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Caitlin.
Good to see you.
You too.
See you down the road.
Sounds good.